The Harry Potter films are simply put incredible. They adapted the books to the big screen so well, and each of the 8 movies is near and dear to mine and many other Harry Potter fans' hearts. Over the course of 10 years, they made 8 incredible films, but I myself have a favorite for many different reasons, and in this video, I'm going to explain why The Order of the Phoenix, the 5th film in the series, is my favorite. Now there will be spoilers for the entire Harry Potter series, so there's your warning. Now let's get started. The Order of the Phoenix book is actually my least favorite in the series, so I was surprised when I walked out of the theater thinking that this was the best one so far, and in my opinion, the final 3 films didn't beat it either. But what made it so good? Well, one of the most interesting parts of this is that the film had a whole new team of people behind it. David Yates was the new director, and with him came his editor Mark Day, who was also new to the Potter films, and this was the only movie in the series that Steve Kloves did not write the screenplay for, Kloves being replaced by Michael Goldenberg. Goldenberg had a big task, not only filling the shoes of Steve Kloves, but he was adapting the longest book in the series to a 2-hour and 22-minute movie. JK herself has even said that this book was too long and bulky, and said that it's her least favorite in the series. So Goldenberg did an amazing job turning this incredibly long book into a very good screenplay for the big screen. One of the things that makes this film so good and makes it stand out from the others is that it took a different approach. The films before this explored the world of Harry Potter, but for this film, the story wasn't driven by the world, but rather was driven by the characters. Yates wanted to explore the people in the world, their journeys, their psychologies, their emotions, and what's going on inside their hearts and their heads. It's easy to make a movie that explores a world, especially if you have a big budget the way these films do, but it's a lot harder to explore characters, and this film did a better job of that than any of the other films. Harry is the character that got the most development, which obviously is fitting as the series is called Harry Potter, but he gets more development in this film than all of the other films combined. In the other films, he goes through some trials, and there are a few moments that explore his inner demons and emotions, but overall, there's not much to go on. The other films focus on things that happen to Harry, rather than what's happening inside of him. Right at the start of the film, they perfectly show Harry being isolated from everyone else, and right away we see a powerful moment where he's longing to have a mother as he watches a boy and his mom playing on the playground. It says so much without a word of dialogue, and to make this blow even heavier, Dudley comes in and starts taunting him about not having a mom.
Where is your mum? Where is your mum, Potter? Is she dead? Is she dead?
It's an incredible way to start the film, and it sets the stage for the rest of the movie and how it's going to explore Harry's character development throughout. Harry being alone and being isolated is the main theme of this film, and we see Harry have to conquer this. It's not easy to allow his friends and loved ones to help him. He blocks Ron and Hermione out again and again.
You don't understand.
Help us to.
He doesn't realize that love is the most powerful thing in the world, a constant theme throughout the books that's rarely explored in the films. So I'm glad they were able to focus on this in The Order of the Phoenix, especially in such a subtle way. The film also did an incredible job of showing Harry's anger build up, first snapping at Dudley, then snapping on Malfoy, both being characters that sort of deserve it. But as the film progresses, his anger extends past his enemies when he snaps on Seamus, then Ron, and then he gets to the boiling point when he screams at Dumbledore.
Look at me!
It's a slow progression, but a very important one, and Yates' execution of showing this was spot on. Another thing this film did well was showing Harry being isolated.
Well, if I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else. Because if it's just you alone, you're not as much of a threat.
Something that's not easy to adapt to the big screen, because in the book, they can just come out and say that Harry felt alone, but in the film, they have to show this. There are many examples, like seeing him alone on the playground, which I mentioned before, seeing everybody stop and stare at him in the common room, making there be a distance between him and everyone else, seeing him walk on the grounds all alone, and even the incredible shot where one minute he's surrounded by people, but the next shot he's all alone and the camera slowly pans out, showing his isolation. And even small things like Christmas at Grimmauld Place, where the Weasleys are celebrating on one side of the table, and though they consider Harry family, he's on the opposite end of the table, looking in as an outsider. Harry is constantly questioning himself in this movie, and he literally thinks that he's going bad.
What's happening to me?
His scene with Sirius is so powerful, as it explores every insecurity and thought that Harry has deep down, and Daniel Radcliffe said that this scene was his best performance in the whole series, and I have to agree with him.
This connection between me and Voldemort. What if the reason for it is that I am becoming more like him? What if after everything that I've been through, something's gone wrong inside me? What if I'm becoming bad?
You're not a bad person. You're a very good person who bad things have happened to.
There are a few things that bring Harry back to reality and out of his head throughout the film, but all of them fail to make this permanent. Obviously, running the DA makes him feel important, but as soon as that goes to hell, he's alone again and wants nothing to do with even his best friends.
Because I don't want to play it anymore. All it does is make you care too much. And the more you care, the more you have to lose. So maybe it's just better
To what?
to go it alone.
In the beginning of the movie, he thinks he can do everything alone, and as I said, that's the main theme and the lesson that the hero learns. Harry has to learn to allow others to help him, and he struggles with this throughout the entirety of the film. But in the climax, we see Voldemort take over Harry's body, and there's an incredibly powerful scene where he realizes that the reason he has the upper hand on Voldemort is because he has people around him that he cares about and that care about him.
You're the weak one. And you'll never know love. Or friendship. And I feel sorry for you.
This scene also resolves his constant doubting that he was bad due to his similarities to Voldemort, another thing that he struggled with throughout the movie. Dumbledore reminds him that it doesn't matter how they're alike, it matters how they're not, and what he does differently than Voldemort.
Harry, it isn't how you are like, it's how you are not.
Realizing all of this, Harry has great character growth and development after learning the lesson that went along with the theme of the film. He goes from a character that was isolating himself to this newly positive character who is now embracing those around him, and he realizes that he has something worth fighting for while Voldemort doesn't. And this is something that the film was able to convey so much better than the book, because in the end of the book, it focused more on the wizarding world and the war starting, but in the end of the film, they wrote it in a way that was able to focus on the main hero and how the start of the war is affecting him. It gives us an outlook on Harry's point of view of the war, rather than the entire DA and Order's point of view of the war. And on top of that, the film didn't just ignore the war. It was able to convey that the war was coming, but they very smartly changed when this happened, making it a line in the beginning of the film rather than focusing on it in the end.
Do you really think there's going to be a war series?
It feels like it did before.
And by putting the growing war in the beginning, it gave Yates more time to study the characters in the end, something that makes the film ending far more powerful than the book's ending in my opinion. Another character that they studied really well was Luna Lovegood, who by the way was perfectly cast and perfectly introduced, just another reason why this film is so good. I love the fact that they made Luna the one to introduce Thestrals to Harry, because it makes the two bond, and it makes their friendship mean much more. In the books, they did not have a moment like this, and Hagrid was the one to reveal Thestrals to Harry during a Care of Magical Creatures class. I just think that having Luna introduce them to him was much more meaningful, especially because she and the creatures go hand in hand. They're both outsiders and very different, and though they may seem dangerous or crazy on the outside, when you take a closer look, you see that there's nothing but good on the inside. I also love that Luna is constantly making Harry feel better, whether it be because he felt alone or because he was upset about Sirius dying. And focusing on Sirius dying, this is especially great because in the films, they had the two bond over creatures that centered around death. Luna's always there for him, and that's what her character is all about, to find the light in the darkness, and by putting her in these situations with Harry to literally bring him out of the dark into the light, it's clear that the screenwriter Goldenberg perfectly understood Luna's character. Neville is another character that Yates did a great job studying. One of my favorite shots in the film was the transition from the newspaper with Bellatrix on it saying that she had escaped, and having it zoom out, and we see Neville angry and upset about this news, as she was the one who tortured his parents into madness. I also like that the films changed the fact that Neville was the one to find the Room of Requirement, whereas in the books, it was Dobby, because having Neville find it just adds to the fact of how much this group means to him, especially after seeing the scene right before this, as he gets bullied in the hall. He's at a low point when he finds it, and ultimately, finding this will lead him to get courage, give him a way to become strong, and will give him a purpose in life, something that he can be proud of. Also, the line where Harry and Neville bond over losing their parents gives me chills every time.
We're gonna make them proud, Neville. That's a promise.
There's a line that the movies added that wasn't in the books, which I absolutely love. When Neville comes face to face with Bellatrix, he recklessly threatens her.
How's Mum and Dad?
Better now they're about to be avenged.
And it perfectly shows how far he's come since he joined the DA. Another thing that shows how well Goldenberg knows the series was the fact that instead of Ron finding the prophecy as he did in the books, they had Neville be the one to find it.
It's got your name on it.
A small nod to readers who knew that he was part of the prophecy, as it could have been about him or Harry, but because they didn't have time to include this in the film, it was a nice touch to throw that in there. Another thing this film did better than any of the other films was represent Ginny in a good way. In the books, Ginny is a very attractive and sought after girl, and she's an incredible witch known for her brutal spells. This film shows her true power multiple times during the DA lessons. And most of all in the final battle, her hex being so strong that it knocked the entire Hall of Prophecies down. She's also not awkward in this one, which is my biggest complaint about the Half-Blood Prince. Here, just like in the books, she's confident, which again was shown very well, especially when Cho was involved. Just small little shots that you'll miss if you blink add a lot, because it says so much in such a short amount of time, and it makes the audience know exactly what she's thinking. And the final character I'm going to talk about before I go into more detail of why this film is so great is Sirius. The film once again did an amazing job developing his character and showing how much he sees James and Harry, and because of this, Sirius treats Harry as a friend rather than being a responsible godfather. Another line that I think is amazing that wasn't in the books but was added for the film was when Sirius called Harry James without even noticing.
Nice one, James!
It just shows how much he misses his old friend, a constant thing that Sirius struggles with throughout this movie, and that Yates did a great job portraying.
It's been 14 years. And still a day doesn't go by. I don't miss your dad.
Now, while this film focuses on character development more than anything, especially compared to the other films that focus more on the world rather than the people in it, The Order of the Phoenix still has an amazing expansion of this world, but they do it in a very elegant way that doesn't dominate the story. The introduction to the Ministry of Magic is incredible, and honestly one of the best scenes in the whole series. The set design is outstanding. It's done by Stuart Craig, who's behind Hogwarts and all the other amazing set pieces, and it's actually the biggest Harry Potter set that they ever made. I remember sitting in the theater and just thinking, wow, this is outstanding and even better than how I pictured it in the book. This movie also introduced us to Grimmauld Place, which again was amazing, especially with all the small details. The set for Grimmauld Place was really cool because it was narrow and tall, and it really gave you the feeling that it was squished between these buildings. I also love that they incorporated Azkaban. This is something that we never saw in the books, it was only ever talked about, so it was really cool to see it come to life, and it was a treat that I did not expect. Now let's look at why this film had better writing than any of the other movies. As I said, this was the only film that Steve Kloves didn't write, and Michael Goldenberg took his place. This is the longest book, so obviously they had to cut a lot out, more so than any other film. But the thing that made the writing for this movie so good was balance. They were able to incorporate most key points in the story, like the Dursleys, Grimmauld Place, the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore's army, Cho and Harry's relationship, Grawp, Snape's worst memory, Fred and George's epic exit, Dumbledore and Voldemort's duel, and so much more. Other films in the series had terrible balance, especially the fourth film cutting the Quidditch World Cup and cutting the Dursleys altogether, or the third film cutting the Marauder's backstory, or even the Half-Blood Prince cutting so many of Voldemort's memories. The Order of the Phoenix was able to incorporate so many different aspects of the story, and they did this through some great writing and editing techniques, most notably montages. Montages were very big in this film, and they were executed so well. We see many montages of Umbridge taking over the school, and we see montages of Dumbledore's army. It tells 3 scenes of the story in the time that it would take to tell one, and that's not an easy task. Mark Day, the editor of the film, did an amazing job cutting these scenes together to make it flow. Another technique that they used that has now become a staple of the Wizarding World films is using the newspaper montage. It gives you so much information in such a short time, and David Yates was the man behind this idea. Before this, Yates was known for many political films, one of the many reasons why they asked him to come on board for this film, as it's much more political than any of the other Harry Potter movies before this, as it goes into slander, corruption, cover-ups by the Ministry interfering at Hogwarts, and so much more. And to represent all of the political aspects on top of the many other plot points they need to cover, Yates adding the newspaper montage was ingenious because it saves so much time and at the same time gives the audience so much information. Another reason why I think this film is better than the other films is because they did an amazing job of choosing what to cut and what to keep. The Half-Blood Prince cut way too much of Voldemort's past and Draco's journey, and kept way too much of the teen drama. The Order of the Phoenix, however, cut the right things and kept the right things in, the biggest example being Quidditch. In the 5th book, Quidditch was a big part of the story, but ultimately, it didn't fit into Yates' vision of studying the characters rather than the world. It was appropriate to cut Quidditch to match the film's tone and pacing. It was the right choice, it would have felt very out of place. Goldenberg also knew when to put comedy in, and when not to, and when it would be inappropriate. In the Half-Blood Prince, they constantly throw comedy in at bad times. One example is throwing in a joke right after Ron almost died.
These girls, they're gonna kill me.
They completely ruined the suspense of the scene. Or in The Prisoner of Azkaban, when they ruined what would have been a very scary and chilling scene, having Trelawney start comedically coughing.
And servant and master shall be reunited once more.
The Order of the Phoenix balanced comedy, action, and suspense perfectly. There are scenes where they have happy and funny moments, like when Mr. Weasley couldn't figure out the Muggle transportation, or when the trio starts laughing at how ridiculous their conversation is. but anytime they have comedy, they perfectly transition to darker moments when they have to. The best example of this is the scene I just discussed where the trio is laughing together. It's a heartwarming scene, and then the music drops and the scene fades out, and it perfectly transitions to a serious scene where Mr. Weasley gets brutally attacked by Nagini. A great example from this film of when to throw in comedy is when Ron tries to save Hermione from Grop and the club breaks.
Groppy!
Unlike Ron almost dying and Trelawney telling a very important prophecy, the scene with Grop has no high stakes, so it's appropriate to throw in some comedy.
That is not polite!
We do something!
We talked about this. You do not grab, do you?
And again, talking about balance, this scene was able to balance both comedy and drama, Hagrid moving on from the comedic bit of the scene to talking about the centaurs being riled up and the war that's coming.
They're gonna have a full uprising on their hands.
This film also did a great job of combining the tone of all the films before it and made it flow. It took the bright colors and happy feel in some scenes, paying tribute to the first two films directed by Chris Columbus, and it also took parts of the very dark films, paying tribute to The Prisoner of Azkaban and The Goblet of Fire. It combines the two very different feels in a great way, and it brings the four very differently toned films along with The Order of the Phoenix together into one. As I said, this is my least favorite book of the series, so what made it become my favorite movie in the franchise? Well, it was all about rewriting scenes from the book to adapt it to the big screen. The best example of this is a scene I already discussed, and that is when Harry is taken over by Voldemort, and only when he sees his friends does he realize that he has power over his greatest enemy because he can feel love. Dumbledore says that it's not how they're alike, but how they're not. So breaking this scene down, the film combined two different scenes from the book. One when Voldemort goes inside Harry and realizes that he can't bear his kindness, and the very long dialogue scene where Dumbledore explains all of this to Harry in his office. Obviously, you can't have that super long dialogue scene to explain everything in the movie, so by combining these two scenes into one short one, it's incredible writing, and not to mention, it's 10 times more powerful as we see all the flashbacks from the past films. It makes you nostalgic, it makes you feel for Harry. And yes, we still have the dialogue scene between Harry and Dumbledore, but it's a short back and forth that doesn't have to cover too much because they covered most of it earlier. And focusing on that, this is especially true because they had Harry and the audience hear the actual prophecy before it was smashed. A great rewrite, because in the books, it was smashed before they heard it, and Dumbledore had to explain the prophecy and show it to Harry in his office. This makes the back and forth between Harry and Dumbledore at the end much more condensed, because the audience gets the point of the prophecy in one line, as we had heard it before.
One of us is gonna have to kill the other. In the end.
Another thing this film did a great job of was representing Harry and Voldemort's connection. In the book, Mad-Eye Moody just comes out and literally says that there is a connection between the two of them. But with the film, you can't do that. You have to show it. So throughout the film, we see more and more of Harry and Voldemort's connection, and they present it to us in such great ways. They just have Voldemort's voice there sometimes to just say, hey, remember, Voldemort is in Harry's head, and it's sometimes as subtle as doing it during a transition. They have other really interesting ways of showing it too. One example that's actually one of my favorite scenes in the film is Harry seeing Voldemort on platform 9 3/4. It's an interesting way to show their connection without saying anything, and it was kind of a gutsy and artsy decision on Yates' part. Another line that the film added, which I absolutely love, is having the line, "I must not tell lies," come full circle, as Harry says this to Umbridge as she's dragged away by the centaurs.
Tell them I mean no harm!
I'm sorry, Professor. I must not tell lies.
A line that was not in the books. It was a great touch by the filmmakers and made Umbridge's payback that much better. As I said, this was David Yates' first Potter film, and boy do I love his creative decisions. The filming, the editing, the music, the sound effects, all of it is just so well done. The editing especially is beyond anything I've seen in recent years. Especially the dream sequences and the occlumency lessons. They're so well put together and cut, and they leave you feeling overwhelmed, just as Harry does when he wakes up from these dreams. Throughout the film, the visual editing combined with the sound editing is just superb. My favorite scene that really shows the incredible sound editing is right after Sirius dies. There's no music when you watch Sirius fall through the veil, you just hear Sirius's last breaths and the voices in the veil. Then the music slowly builds, and you hear the first few weeps from Harry. But the music overpowers his cries, and as he screams, there's nothing but music. It's so well done, it makes the scene so much more powerful. There's one sound effect that is absolutely incredible, as Voldemort gets ready to essentially blow up the Ministry. The sound builds and builds, and then it fades out. And then, boom. The way the action scenes were filmed and cut were incredible as well, especially during Dumbledore and Voldemort's fight, as well as when Harry went after Bellatrix. Yates took the cameras off the tripod and dolly and filmed with a handheld camera, and it really makes you feel like you're in the middle of the action. And while we're on the topic of filming and editing, there's one transition that I feel I have to talk about. It dissolves from Harry to James, and as it dissolves, the two are side by side. It really shows that Harry isn't a little kid anymore the way he was when he first saw his father in the Mirror of Erised, which is where that scene was taken from. He's an adult now who's in the thick of a war just like his father was during the first Wizarding War. One thing that made this film amazing and stand out compared to the other films is the finale. In the book, this sequence was very dragged out and, to be perfectly honest, bored me at times. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because of course I did, but the film made me enjoy this much more, and I think a big reason for this is because they made the sequence more contained and kept the heroes together. In the books, they were split up into groups, and they went to all different parts of the Department of Mysteries. But as I said, the film's main focus isn't the world, its main focus is the characters in that world. Yates realized that doing this extravagant walkthrough of the Department of Mysteries wasn't as important as exploring the heroes in this situation. In the films, we see the heroes work together. Luna encourages Neville, telling him he did a good job by stupefying a Death Eater. We see Harry lead the others to fight the Death Eaters, and we see Harry ready to protect his friends.
Get behind me!
And the best part of the DA's attempt to get the prophecy is seeing the conflict in Harry as all of his friends are held down and have wands pointed at their head. Then Neville steps up and is braver than anyone, which is a great moment.
Don't give it to him, Harry.
And as I said before, I love the inclusion of Neville standing up to Bellatrix, whereas in the books, they have him whimper on the floor as Bellatrix tortured him. I love that, like Harry, Yates had Neville have a transition going from a pathetic kid who's bullied to coming full circle and standing up ready to fight. The film gave Neville more of an arc than the book did, and I think it added a lot to his character. The film wrapped up in a way that I think is the best wrap up in the franchise, besides maybe the 8th movie, because that was the farewell to the series. But the final line of the film leaves you satisfied, but also leaves you wanting more. Not to mention, it's the line that brings Harry's trials throughout the movie full circle.
But even though we've got a fight ahead of us, we've got one thing that Voldemort doesn't have. Something worth fighting for.
This film stands out to me much more than the other films in the series. I think it adapted the book it was based on better than any of the other movies in the franchise did, as it chose the right things to cut out and the right things to keep in. And on top of that, perfectly balanced action, comedy, drama, tension, relationships, and so much more. It also studied the characters in ways that the other films were not able to do, and it paid tribute to past films, combining the light and dark tone of each of the 4 films before it, and I think its finale is my favorite of the 8 films. The Order of the Phoenix will always be my favorite Harry Potter movie out of the 8 in the franchise. Thank you so much for watching, guys. You can follow me on social media to see more of my personal life and see more of this little dude. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook for Movie Flame updates. And I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons listed below. If you want to be featured in the next video, plus get a bunch of other rewards, become a patron today. Again, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you press that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great videos on the way.